Hey,
And you're on.
everybody. Oh, thank you, Carl. Hi, everybody. I'm Kat from the Wild Alaskan Recipe Team, and I'm so happy that you're here with me today. We are making scallops. Today's entire event is dedicated to the wonderful scallop. We've got a big platter of juicy, plump scallops from Alaska right here. So before we get to the cooking, just minor housekeeping. If you have any questions during the event, you can ask those in the comments or the chat box of either Facebook or YouTube. We are live streaming from both, so you'll need to be signed into your channel on YouTube in order to engage in the chat or comments. I forget what they call it there, if it's a chat or comment box. And in Facebook, obviously, you are probably already logged in because you're here with us now. So feel free to drop any questions in the chat as we go along. Let me know where you're tuning in from if you want to say hello as well. And if you need to leave before today's event is over, I think we'll probably be here for a little over a half hour. Don't worry, you'll be able to catch the entire live stream from Facebook or YouTube immediately after this is over, so you can pick up right where you left off. Same link that you're watching from now. So before we get to any cooking, we have Carl in the house today if he wants to come onto camera to say hello. Carl is one of our member experience aficionados, if that's not the word I was looking for, but he's got all the answers to almost any question you have about cooking, about shipping your box. So feel free to say hi to him if you're ever interacting with him on the phone or email. Thanks for being with here, Carl. Or being with us here, Carl. Let's go to some scallop talk. I'm really excited to talk about scallops with everyone today. They are one of my favorite member specials to get because they're so, it feels like a special event when I have them at home. So they're also a really popular offering that we have from time to time. These will show up if you're a Wild Alaskan Company member. These will show up as a member special. I think the next time we're having these available for you is sometime in March. So keep an eye out for them if you haven't tried these yet, or if you don't have them in your freezer right now. Some of you might have these, and so I'm really hoping you'll be able to enjoy everything about them after today's event. Just to give you a little bit of background on why these scallops are so good. For one thing, there are two different, not types of scallops, but scallops are processed two different ways. They're either wet packed or dry packed. So when you hear the word dry scallops, it just means that they're dry packed. Dry scallops sounds bad. You want like a juicy, tender scallop, right? Well, actually, what dry packed means is that the scallops are frozen on the boat. Well, in our case, they're frozen on the boat and they're basically just put into packaging, and then that's it. Nothing is added to it. If you were to buy wet packed scallops or wet scallops, what is the difference between that is chemicals. So there are chemical additives. One in particular is called sodium tripolyphosphate. That is added to things like scallops or shrimp to give them a little extra water weight. It makes them look a little glossier and plumper. So they have the appearance of being really gorgeous and delectable, but the problem with this is that it creates a rubbery texture once you're actually cooking the shellfish. And also, you're paying more for a little extra, like, water weight, essentially. It's like putting the finger on the scale when you're at the store. So you definitely want to look for dry packed scallops if you're able to, ask questions if you're not getting them from us. It's it's going to make a big difference in flavor, but also it's going to make it a lot easier to cook them when you're cooking with dry scallops. So when you're cooking with dry packed scallops, you're not going to have all of this moisture that's shedding off of them, especially when you're searing. So that moisture is going to make it really hard to sear. You're basically going to be steaming the scallops if they're wet packed, and it's not that it's going to be bad. It's just not going to be the most elite meal you've ever made in your life. So these scallops have none of that. This is all natural, just really, really fresh, delicious scallops with no additives. So you get a really nice, clean flavor, and you'll have a lot better luck cooking them. So those are all really good things to know, and probably, definitely for me, was not something I knew about or thought about before learning all the backstory behind what happens in processing. So another thing I want to point out, Weathervane scallops are the largest species of scallops in the world, if I'm not mistaken. So these are pretty substantial. If you want to just see, it's not quite palm-sized, but it's a pretty good chunk of scallop right there. Of course, every scallop is a little bit different. This is from the wild, so some of them will have a smaller, there's a big range of sizes. Some of them will be a little bit smaller. Some of them will be a little bit bigger. These are sorted out accordingly during processing, but you can expect usually the scallops that we offer to be, a really nice size to hold in your hand and really feel that like kind of heft behind them. So because these are so delicious, I'm going to make them 2 ways today. Well, actually, before I start cooking, one thing I want to point out, because this question comes up a lot, when these are processed and packed, we pack them in 20-ounce basically portions. They're usually frozen. This is not what they're frozen in, but they're frozen in something you can imagine like this, where they're basically put in an ice glaze and they come out like a brick of scallops. So if you have a pack of these at home, that's why they're kind of brick shaped. And those bricks are usually measured out to be about 20 ounces for whatever reason. That's just the going size for something like this. This can be a lot of scallops if you're just cooking for 1 or 2 people, because these are so rich. So what I like to do, let me grab this other half of scallops that I have in the freezer. I only defrosted half. This is actually only half of the pack here on the table, about half of the pack. The rest of it is still kind of in that like brick block of scallops shape. So what you can do is partially thaw a pack of scallops just by putting it in the fridge for about, let's say I put these into the fridge last night at 8 o'clock to defrost overnight. They were almost like nearly thawed in the morning around 8 o'clock, but there was still a chunk there that was kind of frozen. So once they're partially thawed, you should be able to kind of crack off the ones that are either on the ends, like the middle is going to stay a little more frozen and solid for longer. And then just put this into a resealable bag. The scallops should be good for maybe another 2 to 4 weeks. I would use them within the month if you can, but they'll refreeze really well. This is kind of different than fish. I would recommend against refreezing a thawed piece of salmon or halibut. But for something like scallops, they can really withstand that going back and forth from the freezer just like this one time. So let me just stash these back in the freezer now. That way you don't have to cook 2 pounds of scallops for yourself, or you don't have to feel obligated to. If you want to cook 2 pounds of scallops, you by all means go for it. Just rounding up, 20 ounces is a lot of scallops for, I know, myself to eat, let alone share with someone. So this is usually what I do, where I kind of break off that part of it. And then don't worry, the scallops will be great in the freezer for up to a month. You can wait longer than that, just depending on how defrosted they were. It'll affect the quality a little bit, but if it's still pretty frozen solid, the only thing that you're really missing once you put it into a resealable bag is that vacuum seal. So yeah, hopefully that really helps you enjoy the right amount for yourself. That being said, I think 20 ounces of scallops is pretty good for 2 servings. It says 5 servings on the pack. So, maybe like 3 or 4 scallops is the recommended serving, but I can eat all of these on this plate right now. I don't know about you. All right, let's start with baking. So I'm going to show you how to bake scallops. This is a really great method for cooking for a crowd. And a crowd meaning maybe 4 or 5 people or more. What we're going to make is a brown butter baked scallop dish with a parsley gremolata. So gremolata is just basically a really fresh topping of parsley, lemon zest, and typically garlic. We're going to do a little bit of a twist on that today. The recipe itself that's in the description of this event calls for pine nuts. So parsley, lemon zest, and pine nuts. Pine nuts are pretty expensive, so you can always swap in something like walnuts, cashews, even almonds, which is actually what I'm using today. Or if you don't want to do nuts, if you can't do tree nuts, swap in something like garlic for something a little more traditional. So why would we bake scallops? Well, I love searing scallops, so it kind of breaks my heart a little bit when I'm not searing them. However, baking scallops is a really good way to cook for more than 1 or 2 people. Trust me, it's a lot more manageable to bake, 20 ounces of scallops than to sear a bunch of them. So this is a really good option when you want to make something a little fancy for friends, family, neighbors, without having to feel like you're running a very big restaurant. So let's get started by making this brown butter. So I'm going to heat some butter in a saucepan here. Is that what's showing? Yep, on the right camera. We're just going to do this over medium heat. Medium is the maximum when you're baking or when you're trying to melt butter, because if you go any higher than that, you're probably going to end up burning the butter. But what we're doing here is caramelizing the butter so that it's a nice brown, nutty, has a nice brown, nutty taste and aroma. So we'll just let this do its thing, cook down really gently. At some point, this will bubble up. Maybe I can turn this up a little bit. But you definitely want to keep a close eye on this. You'll start to see the milk solids in the butter sort of separating from the fat at some point, and those are what are going to toast and become this really delicious, nutty texture and flavor. Maybe texture is not the right word, but a nutty flavor and fragrance. So I'll let that bubble up here in a minute. Going back to why we're baking scallops, one thing that scallops are really good for is searing, because there's so much natural sugar in the scallop. It creates a really nice combination of flavor and texture. This recipe, though, for baked scallops, I think is really clever because you're using brown butter to add that flavor of caramelization. And we're gonna toss some breadcrumbs in the brown butter. So that's gonna bring a really nice texture to the dish. Even though we're not gonna get the scallops seared in the oven, we're gonna have that crunch from the actual breadcrumbs themselves. So you get like a little bit of everything. Plus, you don't have to sear, almost 2 pounds of scallops frantically for your guests. So I guess like my thought about that is, if you've ever been to a restaurant when you're ordering a scallops dish, there's a reason that you're only getting maybe 3 or 4 scallops per plate, and that's because the chef is searing these to order and sending it out right away. I don't think chefs usually sear 2 pounds of scallops at a time, or 1.5 pounds of scallops at a time. So this is not just a more reasonable way to cook a large amount of scallops, but this particular recipe, I think, is a really good way to do it. And it'll be a lot of fun. And as long as people can eat scallops, they're gonna love them. So just to go back to my other camera here, we've got the butter is bubbling up. I can start to see that there's a little bit of this golden color forming underneath all the foam. So this is definitely the time that you do not want to walk away from the pan. It's going to start to brown very quickly from here on out. And it smells so delicious. I've made brown butter for events before, and it's a really good thing to just spoon over something like a simple fillet of salmon. Oh yeah, I can start to see this just coming together really nicely. I'm not sure you can really tell. I'll try to hold this up to the camera. But you see all those little flecks of brown in there? That's the milk solids sort of picking up a really nice flavor. And even the color of the butter has changed. So what I'm going to do is pour this into a bowl, because this skillet being hot, there's still going to be some carryover heat. And I just want to make sure this doesn't get too dark. But there's a really nice golden color under there. Perfect. So let me set that aside for now. And I'm just going to let that cool briefly so that we're not overheating the butter. In the meantime, what I need to do next, let me just pull up my notes. I'm going to season up the scallops that I have here in front of me and get them prepped. So salt, a little bit of salt on them, pepper if you like. And actually, the most important part whenever you're making any scallop dish is you really need to pat them dry. So if you have a paper towel or a clean kitchen towel, just go ahead and gently remove any excess moisture from the surface, and be really, really judicious about this. You want to get all sides. By getting rid of this excess moisture, you're going to ensure that the surface of the scallop has the best texture. And that's really important for searing, especially. There's one trick, actually, if you ever have trouble searing scallops at home. So number one, do this. But number two, I saw on the internet, if any of you are fans of Jay Kenji or Serious Eats, his trick is to add salt to the scallops about 15 minutes before you plan to cook them, and just kind of let them sit. You know, give them, don't go overboard, but give them a nice coating of salt all around. And actually, I did this earlier. The salt is going to pull moisture to the surface of the scallop itself, and that is going to make it easier for you to pat them dry and have a really nice dry surface. So I usually pat them dry first, give them a little salt, and then wait 15 minutes, pat them dry afterward. So the surface now should be a little bit tacky, and that's going to help you get a really, really good sear on a home stove top. A lot of times, you know, a stove top like what we have here is pretty good for searing, but compared to a restaurant stove tops have a lot more BTUs than something that's just you know, a home setup. If you have a commercial stovetop, you're probably going to have a lot more luck searing than using something like this. Because the stoves run so much hotter there, the scallops naturally are going to emit some moisture when they sear. And a really hot stovetop is going to allow you to sear all of that moisture away. It'll evaporate really quickly. Whereas on like a maybe, you know, less powerful stovetop, a lot of that moisture is going to stay in the pan and you're not going to get as hard of a crisp. So hopefully that all makes sense. The salt trick, it's 100% optional, but I definitely find that it has helped me cook scallops and get a really nice, effortless sear. So that's what I did first. By the way, this is also true for if you're searing salmon. If you want to salt it ahead of time, you can, that gives you a little extra insurance. Make sure you pat it dry after, because the salt is going to pull moisture to the surface of the fish as well. This is why you don't want to season anything too far ahead of time, because it'll actually just make the surface of the fish or fillet a little more wet. And if you're not looking to pat that dry, you're just doing yourself a disservice. So while I am actually, what I need to do now is finish getting these ready for my baked dish. So I have a very small baking dish here. I'm actually just gonna cook a little mini portion of this for myself. So not baking for a crowd, just baking for me. I'm gonna put, I think, 7 of these in here. The rest I'm gonna use to show you how to sear scallops momentarily. So I think that is a good amount. Just nestling these into the pan here, nice and cozy. If you're doing a full 20-ounce portion of this recipe, you can use something like a 9x9 pan. That should be give you more room. So what I'm going to do to this is sprinkle on about, well, I'm going to wait actually because I need to make the breadcrumbs first. Sorry, let me switch back to my camera here. I always forget which step I'm at. I'm going to make breadcrumbs in the same skillet that we were cooking with earlier to make the brown butter. So half of this brown butter is going to go into that pan. Let me switch over my cameras again. Oh, that's about half, maybe a little more. And then we're going to turn this up to medium heat. That's about the right flame. And then I'm going to add in panko breadcrumbs. Panko breadcrumbs are really nice because they're really substantial. You can probably hear that really crunchy crisp happening right now. And we're just going to let these toast up. So it should take about 5 minutes, maybe less, depending on how high your flame is. And this is also one of those things you don't want to step away from for too long because they can go from perfectly golden to burnt very quickly. But it's just super simple. This is all we're doing is letting these toast. In the meantime, I'm gonna not follow my advice and walk away momentarily. I'll just show you how to mix up a really quick gremolata. So I have chopped parsley, chopped almonds. I actually went ahead and added some grated garlic in here as well. And to this, we're going to add some lemon zest. If I can remember where I put my zester. Here it is. Lemon zest is going to go into this mixture here. So gremolata, if you've never had it before, it's basically a dry, fresh, herby topping that traditionally is served with an Italian dish called ossobuco. It's a northern Italian, I believe, braised veal shank. And the gremolata, I mentioned earlier, traditionally is just lemon, zest, garlic, parsley. Really, really simple. So we're just going to stir this together. But that mixture is going to add a really fresh, light element to what otherwise could be kind of a heavy dish. Ossobuco is heavy. These scallops, if you've ever had them, they're super rich naturally. And the fact that we're adding brown butter to them makes them even richer. So it might seem kind of like a dry green confetti that we're making here right now, but it should just be a really nice pop of flavor. You can give it a taste. Once this is combined with the baked scallops later, it's going to really all come together. Right now, this is just an ingredient that tastes like fresh, almost raw, and it'll be the perfect balance to the dish that we're making. So let's go back to my breadcrumbs here. I actually went ahead and turned off the flame. I could probably let these toast a little bit more. But these are looking pretty good and they're sounding extra crunchy right now. So for the scallops, we're going to drizzle on the rest of this brown butter. Looks amazing. I'm actually gonna scrape out the remainder of that brown butter because it's so good. And then on top of this, we're gonna add our breadcrumbs. Because these are all kind of next to each other, I'm just piling this in. But if you have your scallops spaced out a little bit, you can just balance out those breadcrumbs right on top. Let me put this back here. And these are going to go into the oven for 10 minutes. Should be nice and plump and just opaque and cooked through by the time that's done. So really looking forward to enjoying that. Once those come out of the oven, we're gonna use this as a topping to finish off the dish. So while we're waiting, now let's get to searing. Searing is one of my favorite things to do with scallops. It is gonna get a little smoky, but it's completely worth it. I have a stainless steel skillet that I'm using, and we're gonna crank this up to high heat, as high as this can go. I'm using the biggest burner on my stovetop and turning it all the way up. Don't be scared, it's gonna be perfect once this is done. So let's talk about cooking fats. I've shared these options with you before, but in case you're new here, I like using something like a really high heat cooking oil. This is just one that's made from sugarcane, I believe, called 0 Acre, that I've really enjoyed cooking with lately for anything that's medium high or super high heat. My favorite though, for sure, is ghee. I love searing with ghee, especially for scallops, because I've just found it to be the thing that can withstand the highest heat out of anything I've ever used, from my pantry. So if you're able to have something like ghee, which is essentially clarified butter, same name or different name, same thing, that's my personal choice for go-to cooking fats. When you're searing scallops, you want to go as high as you can go, which is a little different than searing fish, where you're being a little bit more moderate, using a medium high heat to get that really nice sear on a skin or just on the flesh of the fish. But high heat for scallops, they're very happy when it's really, really hot. So let's see if I skipped anything in terms of prep. These are patted dry. I might just give these another pat just in case, because I want to make sure that they're really nice and dry even after I seasoned them. And this is probably a raging hot pan right now. So I'm going to add just enough butter, or I'm sorry, not butter, just enough ghee to cover the bottom. Maybe a couple teaspoons, something like that. Since I'm just searing 4, that should be enough. It should start smoking, but not like scary smoking, just smoking. We're not really burning anything right now. And then we're going to add these in here once this is sizzling hot. The oil should start to shimmer. And I think you can hear that. Immediate sizzle. If you're afraid of getting your hand too close to the pan, you can always do tongs for this. All right, and we're gonna just let these cook undisturbed for maybe 2 or 3 minutes. We're only searing one side of the scallop. That's what's gonna give us texture without overcooking what we're making here. If you have a fan for your oven, this is a good time to use it. Mine is hidden under here somewhere, so I'm skipping the fan. But you'll kind of start to see a little golden crust forming around the edges of the scallop. And you really don't want to move them right now because we're developing an amazing sear. Any sort of moving that you're going to do is really going to limit how crusty and golden these get. So be patient and trust that these are going to look amazing and that they're not going to stick to the pan. All I'm going to do to serve these is I'll just flip them, let them cook for maybe 30 seconds to a minute longer, and pop them on a plate, and then immediately eat them, ideally. I have a little bit of a sauce that I'm going to serve with it. Let me just switch over my camera. I like a nice spice to go with a sweet scallop, so this is like a Szechuan chili oil, if that's your speed. I find that that's a really, really tasty combo. It's So that'll go on the dish here momentarily. In the meantime, I think these are flippable. So, oh yeah. We are looking beautiful. And I'm gonna go ahead and turn off my skillet now, because these are gonna finish cooking in that residual heat. 30 seconds is really all it needs. You'll definitely notice blackening on the bottom of your pan, but the scallops themselves should be really, really beautiful, not blackened. That's all I'm gonna do here. Perfect. And I'll bring these over to my other camera. Slide this back. Wow, these are perfect if I do say so myself. So just the perfect, really thick crust on there. The crust is gonna maybe last maybe 5 minutes. So I would immediately eat these if you are able to. Like I said, I'm gonna do a little bit of a chili oil on top because that sounds so good and it looks really beautiful. Let's see how these taste. As if I don't know. They're gonna be amazing. Just incredible. This is why I can eat half a pack, because if I'm searing half a pack, it just goes down so easily. I actually have not tried these with this oil yet, but it is the perfect combination of sweet, spicy, tingly. So if you can stand heat, highly recommend trying like a Sichuan style chili oil with the scallops. It's such a nice combination of flavors. I still have about 5 or so minutes on the scallops in the oven. So maybe I can take some questions here. Any?
Yeah, for sure. So first off, does it matter what kind of skillet you're using?
I would say, actually, I'm gonna put the scallop down. I really want to eat all of these. I really like searing with a stainless steel skillet. I don't ever have any problems with sticking, and I think it's just a really easy pan to control. I personally don't love having to use cast iron because my cast iron skillet's underneath a whole pile of pans. It's a pain to get out. I have to clean it a special way. It's really not that hard, but in my mind, that's just like the last thing I want to do is specially clean a pan. So I like using stainless steel. However, a cast iron skillet, if you have one handy, is a really great option. It really holds heat well. You can get a cast iron pan really, really hot, and you won't ever have any problems sticking. I would also, if you have a fancy carbon steel pan, I think that's a really good option. I have said this in previous live streams for searing fish. I would recommend against using something that's a non-stick pan because you're not going to get as robust of a sear as these got today. Something about the non-stick surface makes it really hard for the actual surface of the fish or shellfish to bond with the surface of the pan. That is what is eventually creating the sear. So if you have a non-stick skillet, it's okay. Chances are you're going to get some browning, but you're not going to get that really thick crust that that we're seeing in today's little guys. Ooh, just got some on my computer. So yeah, use what you have, but if you are able to find a really solid heavy bottomed skillet, whether it's cast iron or stainless steel, I think those are my preferences for cooking them.
Amazing. You can also get a workout in with a cast iron while you cook.
So heavy. I can't do it.
So another question here. Can you cook these scallops from frozen?
No. I would recommend against cooking scallops from frozen. For one thing, the way that the scallops are packed in those 20-ounce blocks, it's going to be impossible to cook it from frozen. You'd have to defrost them, separate them, freeze them individually, and then maybe experiment with cooking from frozen. I just really wouldn't recommend it because there's not a good way to get these to be really plump and juicy, even if you were theoretically able to separate them all into smaller pieces. These are just so special and so good. And you're never going to be able to sear them really nicely without them being overcooked. I mean, these were in the pan for maybe 3 minutes, 3.5 minutes maximum. So there's not really much wiggle room you can do with kind of like steaming them first and then searing them. It's just too complicated. Cook them from defrosted. Yeah, that's just how it is. Sorry.
No, that's great to know. Definitely different from the fish for sure. Well, speaking of scallops, still, are they a good source of omega-3s as well?
Scallops actually are, surprisingly. I don't know why that's a surprise to me. I think of omega-3s when I think of fish, but scallops actually have about as many omega-3s as something like halibut, as a whitefish. So these have really nice healthy fats in them. If that's something that you're thinking about, when you're eating a very indulgent dish of brown butter scallops, they actually, surprisingly, even more surprisingly, are a really good source of vitamin D. They're rich in that. So just a 4-ounce portion, I forget the exact amount, gives you some vitamin D. So if you're ever deficient, which I believe most of us are, this is much better than a vitamin.
Awesome. And I've got one more here. If you do make an auto and overcook your scallops, is there any way to salvage those?
Ooh, that is a tough one. I would say, well, first of all, let me just grab these out of the oven because it's about time. If your scallops are overcooked, I'm not sure what I would recommend you to do. Whenever I overcook fish, which it does happen, I end up mixing them into something like fish cakes. So if you're trying to do something similar with scallops, you could actually probably integrate scallops into something that's like a scallop cake. I've never tried it, but I think it could work. I am really curious what like a good option is for that. But for sure, when scallops are overcooked, they're going to get rubbery. But if you're following any of our recipes, I really don't think you're going to end up having these like tough, rubbery, overcooked scallops. A lot of that, just kind of going back to what I was saying earlier about wet or dry scallops, a lot of that rubbery, overcooked texture is really going to come to life when you're cooking wet packed scallops. When you're cooking dry packed scallops, they're still going to be tender as long as you don't completely go overboard on cook time. So yeah, I know that at least one of my colleagues said that, and this isn't for overcooked scallops per se, but she likes having cold scallops chopped into salad the next day. So maybe that's something to try. And report back to me. I'd love to know.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I think that's all for now.
All right. So what I'm doing right now is just plating these amazing looking baked scallops. There's a lot of butter and juice left in here. Maybe I'll just hold off for now. Can always add more brown butter later. So these are smelling super delicious. If you can see, the breadcrumbs are nice and toasty, but the actual scallops themselves, they haven't picked up that much color. So, if you're comparing this scallop to that scallop, this scallop inherently has a lot more flavor just developed on the surface. Like I said, this is such a clever recipe because you have all that flavor on the surface in the form of breadcrumbs. And then on top of that, let's get my hands in here. We can sprinkle on this beautiful topping. And just as soon as this gremolata hits the hot butter and hot scallops, I'm really smelling that aroma of lemon zest that's coming to life just so readily. And if we just bust into here, super tender and easy to cut into. Looks like these are just perfectly cooked. pretty evenly cooked compared to the seared scallops, and give this a try. Super juicy. I mean, you really taste the sweetness. The sweet sugary element of scallops comes through when you're baking them, and they just stay so plump and delicious. I do really love the sear. I've said this probably a million times already. I really do love the sear on a scallop if I'm just cooking for myself. But if you have guests, any more than 4 people, it's really hard to manage an entire pan of scallops. This is a really good way to go. Everyone's going to be happy, including yourself. And it's just so much easier to put everything in a pan, put it on the table. It'll stay hotter. You don't have to immediately eat it lest it lose its shelf life of crispiness. So this is one of my favorite recipes for kind of like balancing those needs in like a real life scenario. I think that's all I want to talk about with scallops right now. If you have any other questions, feel free to drop those in the chat right now. But in the meantime, I just want to close out by mentioning our really nice member special that we have running right now. I think Carl is going to throw the QR code onto the window here for king crab. So we have red king crab. If you were here with me last week, we will be running this special for, I think, the next week or longer, depending on how long they last. But red king crab is a really special offering that we rarely get. Super, super sweet. They're split in half, so they're kind of like little boats of crab meat. For sure, way over the top. Very different than like your average offering that you get from us. So, let's say you have a friend you want to have over for Valentine's Day. Maybe that's a nice day to bust out the king crab legs. Or if you're just hanging out at home and want a snack to like watch with a really good movie, king crab, that's definitely the way to go. If you haven't tried it yet, for sure, I think it's worth trying at least once in your life. It's so good. Otherwise, I think any questions, Carl, before I say goodbye to everybody?
Nope, nothing on my end.
Okay. Well, I will be here again next week, same time. I don't have a link in the YouTube or Facebook channel yet for next week's event, but we're going to be baking halibut 3 different ways with a sauce, a spice, and a nice topping. So this will be a really good event to come to if you really like baking fish and just want some inspiration for different sauces and flavor combos to try. So be on the lookout for that. And until then, I'm so happy that you're here with me today. Live wild, everybody, and have a good week.